that's a hazard tree by our standards. And a hazard tree is something that warranted immediate attention, and it was noted on our iTree survey. If the tree did not appear to have that kind of rot in the middle of it, if there was a branch or something missing up above, a branch can come down for many different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
It could be indicative that there's other things going on, but having a branch down doesn't necessarily mean the whole tree is a problem. That's when you need to get an arborist to do, a qualified assessment of your trees. Quite honestly, even specimen trees will lose a branch here and there, and that's just something that happens as a result of storm damage. As long as that, that damage doesn't rip and go into the heartwood, then typically you would be okay. The tree might heal itself. And that may also be a good question for John to answer when he gets a chance. But if it was visible at the trunk, below diameter at breast height, we did note, and if it was heart rot, we pretty much said that that's immediate concern, removal, or immediate management.
Thank you.
Okay. How many communities that you survey? Thank you for your presentation. You noted 90% native species. How often do you see that? How unique is our community?
That is a great question. That is a great question. I was pleasantly surprised walking into this community and seeing what you had. So, how often does it happen? Not a heck of a lot. So being on a North Shore community like this and having a really nice native base is something special that I think it warrants the village taking a very hard look and putting together, very good management plans to maintain the stand.
I can imagine it's an important part of our property values.
I would agree. Mm-hmm. I would agree.
Thank you.
Just one more and then we'll ask John.
Have you had the experience of going into a community that you've done a study like this for and going in years later to see the follow-up and to see how, if there are any enlightened communities that have done just what you're saying, getting an arborist to manage the trees as opposed to getting tree people who just, it's like a toothpick, you just cut it down. Have you had that experience?
That has many different questions. So I would like to say, I'd like to answer one and then defer a couple to John as well. I have not done a lot of tree inventories where they've been out there for 5 or 10 years where I've been able to go back and look. It's more recently that we're doing these tree inventories. I know some locations have done tree inventories. If you look at Garden City, it's a Tree City, USA. They've had their trees on record for a very long time. That would be one to go and take a look at. Or some other, municipalities that have a Tree City.
West Hampton Beach.
Check and see how they have done it over the years. As far as long term, John might be able to answer that. I don't know his tenure here on Long Island, but you might be able to point out some other communities that have done some of these. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, because it involves what are the costs involved in doing,
One of the last things I want to recommend as well is that it's very important to get a licensed arborist. Anybody who just can cut a tree down, who's got a chainsaw, is not necessarily a qualified individual to make a decision on the health of the tree. It would be good to get the recommendation of a qualified, certified, licensed arborist.
Speaking to that, do you know if there are these arborists who aren't affiliated with a tree company? So, because it seems as though we try to get an expert to say, this one needs to go.
No, you didn't.
And they always say, it's really disease and you probably should take it down.
Liar.
And we don't have that expertise ourselves. And there should be, in an ideal world, somebody who's not affiliated who could just come in as a consultant and be able
It
to.
doesn't have a vested interest
Yeah.
in taking it down. Make a very good point. Most of your local arborists are probably involved with some kind of.
Too bad it's not the
company,
truth.
But honestly, if you get a list of licensed arborists, and I could probably get back to you on that. We have an arborist on staff. I'm working towards it myself, but we have an arborist on staff, and I could probably give you a recommendation on how to do that, and look and see who might be reputable and who might not have ulterior ties to local businesses. Is that okay?
That's absolutely
Okay. All right.
So our second speaker is John Werner. He's with the DEC, Forrester with DEC, and very involved with urban forestry and DEC grant programs.
Don't mind me, I'm gonna try to get us synced up for John's program here. Okay, and let's see if we can get it to go to slide.
Slide.
I know.
You can tell me.
On the top. Slide.
Do you want to?
Sure, it'll probably be easier this way.
Oh, there.
There, okay, I'm good.
Successfully.
All right, thank you so much for having me. What I'm just going to do is give a little, well, hopefully quick update on Forest Health. That's a big thing. So, if you have any questions, feel free to just stop and ask. So, let's start off. So, the biggest threats to Long Island lately is the southern pine beetle, of course. And then now we have oak wilt. So, one of the benefits of being so close to a major hub like New York City is you get a lot of invasive species, unfortunately. So we'll start off with southern pine beetle. It is native. It's not from like Asian longhorn beetles from China. It's not a true invasive. What it is because of climate change, it's getting warmer. The range is expanded. I have a range map coming up. So biggest thing is that it is a native problem, but it's new to us. And so it's a really big issue. It's the most aggressive forest pest in the east. I'm sure you've heard on the news, out west is the same genus, different species, but it's the mountain pine beetle. Very similar though. So this is like I said, the range map. So up until 2014, New York State did not have it. We discovered it then. And New Jersey's had it for over a decade, so I was very thankful I could go to New Jersey and learn from their foresters. It's 3 years for me today to be on the job. So before this, I was a contractor for the Forest Service. I've been all over the country, and it's kind of funny that now we're seeing this here in a way. Because I spent a lot of time in South Carolina and Georgia and Kentucky, and it's a huge issue. So really just want to, I don't know, can you get that light off maybe? Just so or down or down?
Well, I guess it's you know, keep it dim on the edge, just turn them off.
I don't know if it'd be too dark.
Okay. Makes it easier to see. So, the beetles are very, very small. That's one thing. I get a lot of phone calls and people saying, "Oh, I have that pine beetle." So they're very, very, very tiny, and a lot of the times you'll see this. We call it, just pitch tubes. So the tree's only defense is to push pitch out as the beetle burrows in. So sometimes you'll see. Anyway. You can see like the little beetles stuck in the resin. So those beetles that were not successful. So another thing that we point out is if you're red green colorblind, you're out of luck. So we call it 3 stages. So stage 1 is fresh green trees. They look perfectly fine and healthy. And then stage 2 is when the beetle starts to colonize and breed in the tree, and then that's when you start to see it fading, turning yellow, reddish, and then completely dead is stage 3, and the beetle is out of the tree. So when we do flights throughout the entire island, and that's what we look for essentially, just trees should be green. If they're not green, something's wrong. and that's what we look. And so the big concern is the ones, we can see the stage 2s, but the ones are really difficult because they look perfectly fine from the air. So we fly 4 or 5 times a year. It's pretty cool. Helicopter, but
So if you find a tree, you take it down?
no, well, yes and no. Worked on me the other day.
Again, this is, I don't know this projector, sorry.
Okay, well, anyway, I figured I'd try it. This is just a movie of a beetle, and what they do is they essentially swim. So the tree will push out the resin, the sap, and the beetle will swim into the tree. And if the tree's vigorous enough, it'll push the beetle out, and the beetle won't be successful, but it's not working. So, useful to know is there are predatory insects. This is a native. They're called clarid beetles. And the important thing is that, unfortunately, we will not control it, but we use it more as a mechanism for predator-prey relationship. So we hang these traps up that have a pheromone that attracts the beetles, and then we know if our clarid population is very high, that means that there's obviously a huge prey population, southern pine beetle. But bees will eat many other kinds of beetles, so unfortunately they won't control it, but it's useful for us to learn what the population levels are. So one other thing is there's another beetle that sometimes does kill trees, but not necessarily. It doesn't behave the same way as southern pine beetle. And it's called turpentine, so I figured it's a good one to also point out. Main difference is that the turpentine is a lot bigger, and it's the tree on the left is infested with turpentine, so that's just their niche. They like the lower 8 foot of a tree. Southern pine beetle, you'll see the resin throughout the entire length, all the way to the tippy top for southern pine beetle. There's just a comparison. There's grain of rice in the center, southern pine beetle's on the left, and turpentine's on the right.
Are
Yes.
these beetles, they'll be in any kind of tree, or they want like particular trees?
All pine.
All
pine
pines.
species, yep. So, the biggest thing with pine beetles, once it's here. Unfortunately, with the winters we're seeing, and we probably won't see really cold winters for a very long time. And so it's more living with it. So it's a very big issue. It could drastically change the pine barrens. So the pine beetle is more, it will kill trees. It's not necessarily an urban pest, but in the pine barrens themselves, it can be remarkable on how well it kills the trees. So we talk about management, we do suppression, that's cutting the infested trees. Essentially, it's like a wildfire. It behaves in a certain pattern. We can tell which direction it travels. And preventative thinning is also, I don't know if you heard, we did a little demonstration forest out at Rocky Point. And I don't know, is anyone going to the Southern Pine Beetle Management meeting on the 8th and 9th at Poquott National Lab? It should be really good. We have a lot of great people coming. And then also prescribed fires. So a lot of these things is when we don't manage the forest, nature will, and usually will come in with catastrophic fire, beetle attack, and all that. So we're trying to protect some areas before it gets to that point. So a lot of it, like I said, is management goals. Is we do aerial surveys, we fly, do a whole grid. That came up with a weird color of the pine barrens. Fly a couple times a year. And really just to create a situation that does not foster the beetle to survive. So it's a combination of doing suppression work, doing more prescribed burns. We should do that anyway in the pine barrens to protect our safety, reduce wildfire risk, and to help protect pine. I mean, it's called the pine barrens, so we really don't see too much pine regeneration. There should be.
You can pull in there, I don't care, drag it out.
So it's just an example of suppression. What we talk about is, the healthy trees are green on the outside, dead and dying are in the center, and like I said, essentially it behaves a certain way, so kind of just like a fire, it's spreading a certain direction, and you drop the trees towards the rate of spread. Like I said, this is thinning, so thinning is more a preventative means. Suppression is when the beetles are already gone in. Thinning is where we go, and there's a magical number, so many, it's a term called basal area, but essentially it's just trees per acre. So same thing like your garden, you don't plant your carrots right next to each other, give them space. That's essentially what we're doing. We're thinning out the forest to foster the healthy, strong ones, so they don't compete so much with each other, so that when pine beetle does come in, they have a better chance of surviving the infestation. So it's just a good picture of showing a thin forest on the left, thin on the right. It's much easier. The beetles are very lazy flyers. For them to fly from the forest on the right, they don't have to fly very far. And essentially, it's the same as, you know, one wolf can't take down a moose, but 10 wolves can. Same thing for the tree. You know, no one knows what the number is for the beetle, of course, but it's just sheer numbers. And you go out to an infestation and you'll be hit in the face by them. It's amazing how many, like thousands and thousands of these beetles. So that's it. In a nutshell, really, that when we talk about thinning, we're not cutting or anything. And this is a picture of where it is in New York. It's really remarkable. We didn't think he was here at all. And then in 2014 we found it, and then we found it was everywhere. It was not just eastern Long Island. And then we actually even found it upstate too, which was really surprising. And we worked with the Forest Service, and essentially everyone was shocked. They thought it was in New Jersey. It was a Jersey problem. It's the furthest north. They'll never get up to New York. And we were all very surprised to find that now they found it in Connecticut and Massachusetts even.
Wow.
So essentially we kind of rang the warning bell, and now everyone's looking for it. Yes, it is great. So this is I took this photo. This is over Quag. I don't know if anyone's calling the Hills Development. It's out in East Hampton, but this is private property. And it's actually kind of in a way that we didn't do anything, because we could show. People say that the beetle will behave differently up here. It's not. It's doing the same thing that we expect it to do. So this is great to show.